Okay, let's continue. So in the last class we looked at the poles and zeros in the 5 transistor OTA. So let me actually recap that. There were some actually confusions after the end of the class, so I'll clarify it. So again, the point I want to summarize is this: when can you write the pole location as 1 by resistance times the capacitance? Okay. As usual, first it's a first order circuit, there is no confusion. Then you can definitely write the pole as exactly 1 by the capacitance times the resistance. Now if you have a second order system, say now I take a second order system like this. I have two capacitors. I'll call this C1, C2, and it's a network containing resistors, transconductors, blah blah blah. It's a linear network. So here you can approximate the pole location if you have the following conditions met. One is when the poles are far apart. Second is when one capacitance is much greater than the other. If these two conditions are satisfied, then you can approximate the poles. So now the C1 is the largest capacitance, so the lowest frequency pole will be due to which capacitor? C1. And to find the effective resistance due to C1, what do you do to C2? When you're finding the contribution due to C1, what would you assume for C2? It's open, right? It's a low frequency pole, so that's what I'll write it like this. This means C2 is open. Similarly, the high frequency pole you can associate with the other capacitor C2. And for this calculation, what will you do for the larger capacitor C1? You assume that guy is short, so I'll mark it as R21, meaning C1 is infinity. Now the same argument you can extend for higher order systems, but there again similar assumptions need to hold good. So which means I should have the poles to be spaced far apart like this, and also the capacitors should be of this order. So one capacitor should be much greater than the other, which in turn should be much greater than the other, and so on. In addition to this, the capacitance seen by the the resistance seen by the largest capacitor, that must be the largest in your network. Okay, that is the maximum resistance in your network. And other resistance are of similar value. This is okay, we'll not consider so much. But the main thing is at least these two should be definitely satisfied, right? Poles should be far apart, and the capacitances also should be of this ascending order or whatever, and the resistance seen by the maximum capacitance should be the largest. Only under these conditions you can still do the same thing for higher order systems. Okay. Now there is another possibility where you can approximate the pole as 1 by RC, which is where you have uncoupled RC sections or uncoupled time constants. Again, the idea is this: if you want to see if things are uncoupled, you do the following. I'll take a third order case, an example. Say I have three capacitors, C1, C2, C3, and again the network here consists of other linear elements. So here if you want to find if this capacitance or this time constant is uncoupled from the others, the check you do is the following: you find the resistance seen by the capacitance C1, and you see what is this resistance when C2 is open, C2 is short. Similarly, C3 is open and C3 is short. If for all possible combinations you find that this resistance R1 is the same, so I'll say this is the same irrespective of whether you open C2, short C2, open C3, short C3, and all combinations of this, then you can say that this guy is uncoupled from the other two, right? So which means you can write the pole location as exactly 1 by C1 times the resistance it sees. And as we just saw, this resistance, if it's not changing whether C2 is open, C3 is open, blah blah blah, you can assume any condition and find that resistance. Okay. Now similarly you can do the same thing for other capacitors. Similarly you find the resistance seen by C2. If that doesn't change irrespective of the behavior of C1 and C3, whether they are open or short, then once again you can say that this fellow or this time constant is not coupled to these two fellows. So once again you can write the pole location as, if again I'll say R2 is same, or in general I'll make a statement. If let us say the resistance seen by the kth capacitor is same, irrespective of all other Ci, Cj, whatever, they are open or short, then the pole location you can write it as Ck times R. Okay, this is basically, yeah. This is okay. So now let's look back.
What are you exactly indicating by writing the inner network R, G?
Oh, I mean, it's a linear network. It can contain, I mean, I have taken out only the capacitors. So the other elements will be resistors, capacitors, I mean resistors and transconductors.
R, G don't exactly mean.
No, I just mean that the network inside will comprise of other linear elements, which in our case is just resistor and transconductors, right? We are not including inductors, so that's why. Only for linear network you can do this, right? That's all right. Okay, so now let's quickly look back at the 5 transistor OTA calculations. So here, if you recollect, we saw there are actually 3 poles in the network, right? Again, I'll consider CL here. And the only thing we know was the capacitor CL is much greater than the other capacitors, right? And we also know for a fact the resistance seen by this fellow, that is the output resistance of the OTA, that will be the largest. So we can safely say that the lower frequency pole or the dominant pole will be due to this fellow, right? And for that you can assume that these two fellows are open. That is fine, right? Now when you are trying to calculate the other 2 poles, you can assume that CL is short. That's what we did, right? But now you end up with a second order network. So here you don't know the relative values of C3 and Cx. They could be of similar value. And remember, for a second order network you can approximate poles as 1 by RC if the poles are far apart and the capacitance are also far apart. Here these two might be of similar value, and also even after you calculate the poles, you see the poles are not so far apart. One is Gm by C, other is 2 times Gm by C. But that's when we decided to see if the time constants here are very strongly coupled, right? So that's why we did the following. We actually looked at the resistance looking into Cx, and we saw that this resistance is roughly the same whether you open C3 or short C3. Right? I mean, strictly speaking, if we exactly calculate this resistance, if C3 is open, it is like looking into the source of a transistor where the drain is at 1 by Gm of the PMOS. This will be some resistance exactly, but approximately it is 1 by Gm, right? Similarly, if I short C3, this is short. So essentially you have something like this, drain is short. So what is the exact resistance looking into the source? 1 by Gm, exactly what is it? Parallel R0 of the transistor. Again, exactly it is not the same, but approximately it is the same. Here they are looking in resistance, whether C3 is open or short, it is not exactly equal, which means they are not completely uncoupled, but because the resistance is not changing so much, whether I open or short C3, the coupling is not so much, we can approximate that they are not so much coupled. So that's why we could still write the pole location approximately as Gm by C. Okay. The same thing we did for C3 also. Here also you found that the resistance looking here is approximately 1 by Gm whether I open or short Cx. So I can write the pole due to C3 like this. So again, the idea is if the resistance doesn't change exactly, we know they are completely uncoupled, then the pole locations are exactly equal, right? Now if the resistance value changes so much when you open or short the other capacitor, then the coupling is very strong. Then you cannot write the pole locations approximately also. But if the resistance does not change so much, whether you open or short the other capacitor, then the coupling is very weak. Then we can kind of approximate the pole locations this way. This is fine. I mean, these are some fine prints that and minor fine assumptions that have gone behind writing the pole locations directly. Most of the time people don't even bother about it, but should be aware that these are the conditions under which we can write it. Only if the time constants or the capacitors are uncoupled, you can do this. Otherwise, if we have some other network where you find that the resistance changes significantly when I open or short the other capacitor, we cannot directly write the pole locations. This is fine. Okay, so then here we calculated the poles and then we looked at the zeros, and we looked at the zeros in the differential mode transfer function. So here we saw strictly there were 2 zeros, but then I saw if I ignore the R0 for these NMOS transistors, the common source potential became 0. So look like Cx is not playing any role. But that's when I mentioned that if you calculate the 2 zero locations here and tend R0 of the NMOS to infinity, you will find one of the zeros will exactly cancel the pole due to Cx, and the pole zero cancellation happens. Right? So we decided to use this simplified circuit and calculate the zero, and we kind of did that. So we finally we have only 2 poles and 1 zero, and in this, one pole is the low frequency pole. This is what we call as the dominant pole, and so which means in practice we can approximate this transfer function as a first order system containing only one dominant pole. Again, I hope the name dominant pole makes sense, because it kind of dictates the speed or the settling of the circuit. So it is like, when you go as a group to mess for eating lunch, there will be one guy who always finishes eating fast, that is the highest frequency pole, but the entire group has to wait till the guy who eats very slow finishes, only then entire group can go. So it is like that. Dominant pole is that low frequency pole who finally dictates the speed of the entire group. Okay. Cool. Then we looked at the cascode, that is trivial. So now let's move on.